The fog rolled in from the Atlantic, like it always did, heavy and cold, swallowing the rocks beneath it. But tonight, something inside that fog whispered a name that no living person should have known. And the man standing on the cliffs realized he wasn't alone. Not anymore. The coast of Maine has always carried a kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty. It feels watchful. When the wind drops low and the sea settles into a slow, heavy rhythm, you can almost sense the weight of everything that has happened. Their storms, shipwrecks, old keepers who tended their light until their final breath. Much of it is recorded in logs, and some of it remains only in the stories fishermen pass on in low voices. The tale of the Whispering Lighthouse belongs to that second category, a piece of folklore that has survived generations without ever needing proof to stay alive. The lighthouse in question sits on a rugged point of rock, far from the nearest town. According to local accounts, it was built in the late 19th century, and its earliest structure was replaced more than once due to storms and erosion. Nothing unusual there. Maine has dozens of lighthouses with similar histories. What sets this one apart is not its shape or its age, but what people say happens when the fog rolls in thick enough to hide the horizon. The story begins with a lighthouse keeper, referred to simply as the Old Keeper. His name isn't recorded in any public document I could find, and locals tend to speak about him as if he were a mixture of several past keepers rather than just one man. The consistency lies not in his identity, but in the way he is described: patient, solitary, and so devoted to his duties that he rarely visited the village except for supplies. According to the legend, he disappeared one winter without a trace. Now, there is no confirmed historic record of a lighthouse keeper vanishing at that site, but the folklore insists that something took him, or perhaps called him, into the fog. Fishermen who claim to have heard the story from their fathers or grandfathers say the Old Keeper was last seen standing at the railing, facing the sea, unmoving for hours. When the relief crew arrived days later, the lantern was lit, the door was locked from the inside, and the keeper's oilskin coat was still hanging right where he always left it. Whether any of this actually happened is uncertain. What is certain is that the story has been retold for so long that it has become part of the local identity. And the heart of that story isn't the disappearance, but the whisper. They say the lighthouse never fully goes quiet, even on calm nights. A metallic creak, a soft groan, inside the tower, nothing extraordinary. But during a deep fog, something else joins the sound of metal and wind. People who fish near the point describe it as a voice that rides the mist like a thin thread stretching out from the lantern room. No one claims to understand the words. Sometimes it sounds like a sigh, sometimes like a name, and sometimes like a plea. A former lobsterman interviewed in a local news piece decades ago said he once anchored near the point when fog swallowed the water so quickly he felt blind. He turned off his engine to save fuel, waiting for visibility to return. That was when he heard it. A whisper so faint he thought it was just the sound of his own breathing at first. Then it came again from somewhere above him. He said it felt like someone calling down from the tower, though he could barely see the outline of the light. The words were too soft to understand, but the tone was unmistakably human. He started his engine and left without waiting for the fog to clear. When he told others about it, no one laughed. They simply told him he had been lucky. Another story, equally impossible to verify, describes a family that hiked along the cliffs one autumn afternoon. Fog arrived faster than they expected, and the parents hurried their children back toward the trail. That was when their youngest child turned and asked why the man in the white coat kept whispering to her. The parents say there was no one there, only mist curling over the rocks and the silhouette of the lighthouse through the haze. They left as quickly as they could and never returned. These accounts, though unverified, all share a common pattern. The voice is always described as gentle, not screaming, not threatening. It's almost sorrowful, as if someone is trying to call out from a distance they can't cross anymore. Some locals believe the old keeper still tends the light in ways no living person can. They say he never abandoned his post. Others suggest the whispers come from sailors lost to storms, calling out in the hope that anyone will finally hear them. And then there are those who say the sound is nothing more than the wind sliding through cracks in the stone or echoing strangely across the cliffs. Atmospheric pressure can create all sorts of bizarre acoustic effects, especially in dense fog. Anyone familiar with the Maine coast knows how icily sound can distort out there. Yet even the skeptics admit one thing: spending a full night near that lighthouse feels different. The way your footsteps echo, the way the shadows stretch and twist across the tower, the way the ocean itself seems to fall quiet at certain moments, as if it's listening for something. A man who once rented a cabin nearby wrote that he never believed in ghosts, but he also never slept a single night without hearing something moving inside the lighthouse. He said the sounds weren't unusual enough to be supernatural, just enough to keep him awake. On his final evening, while he was packing his car, he stepped outside and paused. Somewhere above, in the thick midnight fog, he heard what he described as the softest voice I have ever heard. Like someone calling across a long distance with absolutely no strength left. He said he wasn't frightened, just unsettled. As if he'd overheard something deeply private, meant for someone else entirely. The most recent version of the legend suggests that the whisper doesn't come from a ghost at all. Instead, it's said to be a memory trapped within the structure itself, a kind of echo preserved by the lighthouse's isolation and the region's unique climate. Fog, after all, changes the way sound vibrations travel, and it's possible that certain frequencies can linger longer than expected. This explanation offers a scientific angle that some residents prefer, especially those who work on the water and don't enjoy the idea of supernatural company out on the waves. Still, the story refuses to fade. Even people who dismiss it as pure fantasy admit they avoid the lighthouse after dark. Not because they expect to see a ghost, but because the place feels heavy with a kind of presence that's hard to explain. There's something about the combination of salt air, weathered stone, and endless fog that stirs the imagination, encouraging it to believe in more than the mind usually allows. The last person I spoke to about this story, a retired mariner who spent 40 years at sea, said something that really stayed with me. He leaned back in his chair, closed his eyes, and recalled the sound of waves smashing against the rocks at that very point. Then he added quietly that sometimes, when the night grows colder and the fog thickens around the hull of a boat, it doesn't take much for a voice to slip into the imagination. But imagination or not, he said, the feeling is real. He finished with a sentence that was so strangely gentle, I asked him to repeat it. Some places don't forget, he said. They keep calling until someone listens. Whether the whispering lighthouse of Maine is a place that remembers, or just a place where the wind plays tricks. Only those who venture near it during a heavy fog can say for certain. But the legend remains, carried by the tides, by stories told over dinner tables, and by the faint suggestion of a voice that may or may not exist. And if you ever find yourself on those cliffs during a misty evening, with the light barely visible through the fog, you might hear something too. A soft, fragile sound drifting from the tower, searching for someone willing to listen. Just remember what the locals say. If it whispers your name, walk away. Thanks for watching. What do you think is making the sound? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more strange stories from forgotten places. See you next time.